Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark.
Eerie Encounters, Volume 6, Story Number 1. Samantha told me about it on our third date. We were watching a movie on her couch when I made my move to kiss her. She whipped her hand in front of my face and blocked me. "There's something you need to know," she said. I braced myself. Here it comes. "I'm not ready for a relationship, nothing to do with you, of course." It was the absolute last thing that I wanted to hear because I was crazy about her. "Okay," I said. "I have a removable face." That's a new one. "You have a what now?" I was about to laugh, but she was wearing a deadly serious expression. "I have a removable face." "Is that like a metaphor or something?" "No, my face is literally removable. Look closely." She lifted her chin and traced her jaw line with a finger. "You can see the seam." After admiring how beautiful her neck was for a dizzying moment, I leaned in for an inspection. It was very hard to see, but it did look like there was a slightly unnatural transition there from her face to her throat. I grew dizzier as a dozen questions rushed into my brain. "Don't bother asking why or how or anything like that," said Samantha. "I can't tell you that. If that's going to be a problem, you should leave now. I'm letting you know this because I like you, and I want to take the next step, but this is non-negotiable." "Okay," I said, unsure what was happening. "Not a problem. So what? You have a removable face. Who cares? It looks good." "There's something else. Once a day, usually in the evening, I have to remove the face and disinfect the inside of it. If I don't, it will rot. This takes about an hour, give or take, depending on how my day went. During this time, you must never look, ever look at my real face. Never. Do you understand?" "Yeah, got it. Don't ask about it. Don't look at your real face." Samantha stood up. "Now, I'm going to go into the bathroom and clean my face. That will give you plenty of time to think about what I've told you. If you're here when I'm done, that's great. I would like that, but if you're gone, I'll understand." She turned and walked into the bedroom. I sat in stunned silence as I heard the bathroom door close. I gave the same thing some serious thought. It was possible it was a joke or some kind. It was possible that it was a delusion. Was it possible that it was true? Well, it was certainly possible to transform an actor's face with movie makeup, so I supposed it was possible that Samantha wore a removable face every day. Maybe she had a horrible accident where her flesh had been mangled. Maybe her face had been melted by acid or burned by fire, or the skin torn off by heavy machinery. If it had, I would never know because she would never tell me and I would never see it. I pictured a face of raw naked muscle rotting away. Could I kiss her? If that was what I was kissing? But wasn't that what we all were under the skin, just muscle and bone and blood and squishy organs? I paced around the living room, running my hand through my hair. I liked Samantha a lot. She was smart and funny and beautiful. But was that beauty real? Did it count? Did it matter if it was real or not? Was I being superficial even worrying about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I was still there. I looked at her face. She smiled, and I was in love. We dated, we moved in together, we decided to get married. For the most part, it was a completely normal relationship, typical of two young people in love building a life together. During the day, it was easy to forget about the face altogether. It looked natural enough, and only in certain positions and certain lights was there ever any indication that it wasn't natural. But every night was the same. Samantha would close herself in the bathroom, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for two, and clean the inside of her face. The curiosity never left me. I would sit there and wonder what was under that face. I came so close to barging in on her a few times, but I never did. I did occasionally ask her about it, about what, if anything, had happened, about how it was possible to make the removable face look so real, about what it really looked like underneath. I tried to coax her into showing me, assuring her that I loved her no matter what and didn't give a damn what her real face looked like. I was just curious, that's all. She never showed me, or told me the story behind it. She didn't get upset at me unless I was really badgering her. She'd just shrug and say, "You know you can't see it. You know I can't tell you about it." I never told anybody about Samantha's removable face. It's not that she asked me not to. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. Except once I did tell somebody. It was during my bachelor party. We had rented several cabins in Big Sur and spent the night drinking and packing our noses with powders that we shouldn't have been packing in our noses. Everyone else had passed out, and the sun was creeping up behind us as I stood on the majestic cliffs with my friend Chris, looking down the Pacific waves crashing against the rocks. Chris was my best friend, as close to a brother as I'd known. We'd grown up together, and he visited each other at college often and spent the summers together. After college, we moved to different cities, but we stayed in close contact. Standing there on the cliffs, I told Chris about Samantha's removable face. At first, he thought I was joking. Then he had 1,000 questions, most of which I couldn't answer. "What's underneath?" "I don't know, man, I don't know." "Doesn't that drive you crazy, not knowing?" I shrugged. "Lots of stuff I don't know. Don't know how to do calculus, and I don't know what happens when we die." "But dude, she's about to be your wife, and you don't even know what she looks like? I mean, I'd have to take a look. Like, you could set a camera up in the bathroom? That's where she does it, right? Set up a camera and have a look, and then you'll know." I said, "Yeah, it drives me crazy. I've asked her a million times, but she told me I could never look. Gotta respect that, man, even if I don't like it. That's love." Chris laughed. "You telling me to respect a woman? Up is down now." Then we fell back into talking about old times as a new day dawned. Chris was in town for business last week and planned on spending the weekend at our house. The conversation at Big Sur had happened 4 years ago, and we hadn't spoken about Samantha's removable face since, despite keeping in close contact and seeing each other as often as two people transforming into adults in different parts of the country can. It happened on Saturday evening. We were lounging lazily in the backyard, deep into the beer, having just finished with some grilled steaks, when I got a text from work. "God damn it," I groaned. "I have to make a work call." "Seriously?" said Samantha, raising an artificial eyebrow. "On a Saturday night?" "My biggest client, baby, sorry." "It is what it is, I guess," said my wife. "I'm going to head inside and get cleaned up. Chris, are you okay just hanging out for a bit?" Chris smiled. "I'll be fine. Got my beer. Got some weed to pull in your garden. God knows your lazy-ass husband isn't going to do it. Those tomatoes are choking to death. It's a tragedy." I rolled my eyes and went into the side yard to make my call. 15 minutes into it, I heard the screams coming from inside. Both my best friend and my wife were wailing in terror. I dropped the phone and ran into the house and down the hall to our bedroom. Through the open door, I could see that the door to the master bathroom was also standing open. "Don't come in," screamed Samantha. "I don't have my face on." "Call an ambulance." He looked. Oh God, he looked. She sounded desperate and truly horrified. That made me desperate and horrified, and I wanted to rush into the bathroom, but I knew suddenly that would be a mistake. I knew suddenly that Samantha didn't want me to look at her real face, not out of a sense of vanity, but for my own safety. Chris staggered backwards out of the bathroom. He was holding a straightened out paper clip, which he had used to pick the privacy lock. Now he was stabbing it again and again into his eyes, shouting gibberish. He was clearly in the depths of madness, and it turned my stomach to see him mutilate himself. "Call an ambulance," my wife screamed. "Don't come in here." "He looked." I turned and ran back to the side yard, where my phone was lying in the newly mowed grass. My client was still on the line, alarmed, asking what happened with all the screaming. I hung up on him and called 911. When the paramedics arrived, Chris was having a seizure in the hallway. Samantha was stroking his head, sobbing. Her face was on, but it had been done hastily, and everything looked a little off. My world has been dark this past week. My best friend is in a psychiatric hospital under suicide watch. He's completely blind and mostly catatonic, except when he slips into a violent babbling mania. The doctors are optimistic that his state is temporary, but they don't know the truth about what caused it, because I told the paramedics that Chris had taken a large dose of psychedelic mushrooms and fallen into psychosis. I saw no good reason to tell the truth about what had happened. Who would believe that one look at my wife's real face would make somebody insane? At best, we would be the subjects of a long investigation. At worst, we would have to prove that what we were saying was true by showing somebody Samantha's face. Then the same thing would happen again. And what after that? I had no idea, and no interest in finding out. For Samantha's part, I knew that she would never consent to show anybody her real face, no matter what the consequence of refusal were. I did get a follow-up call from the police asking me to confirm my story. The hospital found no traces of psilocybin in Chris's blood, though that's not unheard of since it has a short half-life. If they end up testing his hair, I will likely be in a lot of trouble. But that's truly the least of my concerns. Samantha is in a state of her own. She still cleans the inside of her face, though not as regularly, and when she puts it back on, it's always crooked now. It's beginning to smell a little bit. I've tried to assure that it wasn't her fault. He knew, I said. I told him that nobody was ever allowed to look at it. He knew, and then he broke into the bathroom. That's not on you, baby. Please talk to me. Not on me. That one look at my face makes people insane. Please. I just need some time alone. As for me, I'm doing my best to hold it together. Do you know what's strange, though? Despite what happened to Chris, I still find myself curious about what my wife's real face looks like. More curious than ever, really. Next story. So I've been working at the same hospital for years now as a nurse in the ER. I've seen a lot of things, all kinds of horrific shit. Blood and gore and just about every household item you can think of inserted into some guy's rectum. I've seen limbs ripped off. I've seen intestines coming out. Almost 10 years working in an ER, and you're going to see a lot. You're going to be hard to shake. But last night something happened. Some girls came in, and I've never been scared like this. I've never had that feeling of I have no idea what's going on with this patient the way I have with these 3 girls. It was a sad story to begin with. One of those men who gets off kidnapping girls and keeping them prisoner in his basement of his garden shed. Real sicko. But those poor girls were found and rescued and brought right to us. Now my hospital isn't that big. There's about 5 of us who've been trained to take a rape kit. And there were 2 of us on duty for that last night. Me and this new nurse named Laura. She's been with us about 6 months. We were both paged to a set of examination rooms that were made up special for such a horrific occasion. Put aside so they're a little more private. They're subtly different, the assault victim's room, a little less sterile, a little more comfortable, with a few extra chairs for the cops to sit in while they interview the victim. I expected reporters and wackos to be everywhere. But by the time the girls were brought into the exam room, it was all whispers and gossip. Those poor girls, pulled out of some pervert's garage. Those poor girls, they can't even talk. Who knows if they're even from here? Maybe they're international sex slaves. One of the other nurses suggested to me as I passed by her on my way to do my first exam. After examining them each one by one, I've made the following observations. 1. None of them seem capable of speech or of making any noise. They can communicate with simple gestures, but I don't even know if any of them are literate. 2. They all have the same eyes. I don't mean the same eye color. I mean that, looking them in the eyes, you get the feeling that you're looking at the same person you just saw in the last room. They're blue with flecks of gray, and I swear that all of them have the same exact patterns of fleck. 3. They all have an identical bump on their back, between their shoulder blades. That, in my professional medical opinion, is weird. It could be some kind of congenital condition or birth defect, or a repetitive strain injury, for example, if they've been forced to balance something on their shoulders, or to hold a certain position for a long period of time. Number 4. They are all losing hair at an alarming rate. Merely laying back to allow me to do a pelvic exam, more on that later, made each of them lose handfuls of hair on the bed. Could be from malnutrition, vitamin D deficiencies, or other. Or so I thought, until their blood work came back. Number 5. They are in perfect health. Have not been drugged, are not dehydrated or malnourished, even though they have the paleness and pallor of women who've been kept hidden for years. None of them have the corresponding vitamin deficiencies or health problems. It seems impossible to me that any of these women were held hostage for any length of time. They're probably healthier than I am, and I've had access to health care and the ability to go outside a dank little garage. Number 6. This is where it gets weird. They have no visible genitalia. That's right. That's what I said. Each time I went to perform a pelvic exam, I saw the same thing. Nothing. no vaginas, no labias, nothing. And might I add, no anus? They looked like Barbie dolls, except Barbie dolls might be a little more detailed. Laura and I met up in the middle of the rooms and took a little break in a supply closet to frantically whisper about these women and what we're supposed to do. What are they? And why do they look like that? But what about their digestive system? Were all perfectly valid things that the young, inexperienced nurse asked me. That I, the old pro, was supposed to be able to answer. But I was even more lost than she was. What I want to know is what that pervert was keeping them for. I couldn't help but voice the thing that had been bothering me. Had he done this to them? Some kind of sick experiment in cosmetic surgery? Was it some kind of human centipede attempt that we thankfully interrupted in time? Should we get someone from gastroenterology up here, Laura asked. What if he sewed up their digestive systems? Wasn't right, though. There was no scar tissue, no sign of a recent operation. And if they'd been like that any longer than a day or two, there would be plenty of evidence in their blood of the toxins building up in their bodies. Nothing made sense. No, I told her. I'm going to try to communicate with them one more time before we decide on a course of action. I left Laura. I made the blankets and towels, folded and stacked hopefully in shelves, and went back towards the assault suite. I passed at least 5 police officers on the way. Did they know? I couldn't help but wonder, did they know that these weren't normal victims? I knocked quietly before letting myself into one of the rooms, and I heard someone stop talking just as I entered. The girl was still sitting on the bed, black hair longer than I remembered it being with vaguely Asian features. Her eyes were bluer than I remembered. My name is Clara, I told her. I'm the nurse who examined you. Do you understand English? I asked, and my only response was a solemn nod of her head. Can you speak? I asked. She neither shook her head nor nodded. She just stared at me with those blue eyes, swirling with flecks of gray. Where are you from? I asked again, but only got the same response. How old are you? Again, nothing. You have some physical abnormalities. Have you ever been seen by a doctor before? I asked her. No response. But the way she looked at me seemed to change somehow. I sensed a flicker of hostility, anger maybe, or resentment. It was not a professional question. To ask, but my mouth formed the words before I could stop myself. Are you a human being? The girl's mouth dropped open, almost too far open. No sound came from her, but from all around us there was screaming erupting from all sides. There was a commotion in the hall as the police officers ran to the other victims. The one screaming now for no reason other than the question. I'd asked the only one of them that was still silent. The next 20 minutes or so after that was a blur. But I know that I got up and I left the hospital immediately. I don't even think I clocked out. I didn't even grab my bag. Didn't give a shit about my post-shift cigarette. I'm probably fired right now, but I can't go back. They're still not on the news. I don't know if they ever will be. I don't know if the cops know what they're dealing with. But I'm sure not going to be the one who tells them. I can't stop thinking about it, though. What are they? And what if they weren't the victims? Next story. Driving through the backwoods of eastern Kentucky in the dead of night is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Anyone who's ever been in the area knows exactly what I'm talking about. All the light from the moon and the stars is blocked by thick vegetation and hills, so it's pitch black. There's history in those hills, a lot of history, and this energy fills the place with this crazy bad vibe. It's like the very land is pissed at you, like it wants you dead. The roads aren't well traveled, and you'll be hard-pressed to see a single car driving down them at night. Cell service out there is, at least for me, spotty at best, non-existent at worst, and you pray to whatever you believe in that your car doesn't break down, knowing full well the folks who live smattered across the hills are isolated, private people, knowing that they wouldn't be very happy seeing you wandering onto their property in the dead of night. None too happy at all. It's what my mom calls backcountry. One word. She always told me to avoid the area if I could, saying that I'd likely be murdered or worse out there. And I've heard the stories too. Stories about people getting out of their car to help a stranded motorist only to be ambushed, robbed, kidnapped, and or murdered. Stories about strange lights and ghost killers and vanishing hitchhikers and crazy inbred hillbilly families. There are said to be hundreds of unreported deaths out there. People just vanishing off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. I've always avoided driving through those hills, but one night I found myself driving straight down Kentucky 52 South instead of I-75 South, straight into those hills, straight into their darkness. Around midnight, I got a message from my mom that my dad had been taken to the hospital and that his condition was serious. I immediately jumped out of bed and into my car despite my mom telling me to wait until morning to drive down. I lived up in Richmond at the time, while my parents were down in Hazard. It's a little under a 2-hour drive via I-75 South and a little over 2 hours on Kentucky 52 South. That night, though, I-75 South was closed due to an overnight bridge reconstruction project, so I had to take Kentucky 52 southbound, and it goes through some pretty gnarly bad country. I figured nothing would happen, that it'd be a smooth yet anxiety-ridden 2-hour trip, but there was this dread I couldn't shake boiling up in my gut, urging me to wait until morning, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had to see my dad. I got from Richmond to Irvine just fine, driving the winding road in hilly terrain with ease, going faster than the speed limit. It was from Irvine to Jackson that things took a turn for the worse. First of all, it was dark, really dark, and even with my brights on, they still only barely lit up the surrounding area. The constantly curving roads didn't help either. I found myself slowing down, having to navigate through the dark, around the switchbacks and turns, inclines and depressions, hoping to God I didn't run off the road or hit an oncoming vehicle. And the dread was at the forefront of everything now. Sure, it could have been exacerbated by worry for my dad, but there's something about those hills, something evil, and I was really afraid. The radio was dipping in and out, so I put in a CD and tried to drown out the fear with music. But after the first song, I turned off the stereo completely and drove in silence, all my senses on high alert. It felt wrong. It felt like I was being watched. Every so often, I would see a light flash in the woods, like campfire but brighter. And I swear at one point between Crystal and Bettyville, there was this pale and hairless and huge humanoid running after next to my car on the road. Swear I saw it in the rearview mirror. It disappeared into the darkness in the trees when I braked and spun around in my seat. 30 minutes out of Bettyville, I saw a kid. He was wearing a yellow shirt, blue shorts, and a red jacket with a hood up, colors that reminded me of Superman. He wasn't wearing shoes. That bothered me. I flicked my brights down to their normal strength and slowed to a crawl, wondering what the hell this kid, who looked to be under 10, was doing out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. I made sure my doors were locked, cracked my window, and asked him if he was okay as I rolled towards him. He didn't respond. I glanced down at my phone. No service. Shit. I asked him if he was okay again, and he looked up at me quickly, making his head fall down. He was crying. I slowed to a stop, and he immediately ran over, sticking dirty fingers into the cracks of my window, pounding on the door. He was screaming something about how they were hunting him, and that they were going to let the monster eat him, and they were watching us now, waiting just beyond the darkness. At this point, I was seriously freaking out, and I might have been screaming too. I tried to roll my window up while trying not to hurt the kid, but he wouldn't release his grip on my window. I think he was trying to break it. A bright light flashed onto us, and the kid screamed even louder, let go of my car, and began running down the road back towards Beattyville. And I'm ashamed to say, I took off. I was afraid I was going to die and become another statistic of these hills. In my rearview mirror, I watched as what looked like 3 men in hooded robes ran out into the road. The spotlight one of them was holding was trained onto my car and hit the mirror at an angle that blinded me, but it looked like the other two were going after the kid. I blinked and looked back towards the road, speeding like a bat out of hell. I pulled off in Jackson and drove straight to the police station. 2 detectives and an FBI agent who happened to be in town working with a liaison listened to me with grave faces. When I was finished, the FBI agent thanked me, then told me that a kid had gone missing the day before from a Bible camp near the Kentucky River. He said that's why he was in town in the first place. Apparently the kid and his friends were out playing hide-and-seek in the woods in broad daylight when he just disappeared. He was wearing yellow, blue, and red like Superman. The strange thing is, his footsteps just stopped, and his shoes were still there. It was like he was lifted off the ground by air. It was weird. Half a dozen cop cars with twice as many cops, the agent, and a search and rescue team were dispatched to the area within minutes after me reporting what I'd seen. I drove to a local diner and ended up staying in Jackson until morning, making the 40-ish minute drive down to Hazard after the sun rose. After hearing why it took me so long to get down there, my mom was beside herself with panic, but was also glad I was okay, telling me I did what I had to do to survive, that I was brave, and wasn't a coward. My dad ended up making a full recovery. If you're wondering if I do feel like a coward, if I regret not letting that kid into my car, the answer is a resounding yes, I do. I am. It haunts me to this day, but I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed there any longer, and I don't know if either of us would have made it out alive. Next story. This image is from the Kmart Teen 1996 fall catalog, and it actually has quite a peculiar story behind it. As far as anyone can tell, this is the only existing image of Kaylee Houston, who vanished without a trace in the summer of that year, shortly after moving with her family to the city of Glendale, California, just outside of Los Angeles. The Houston family had moved from Shawndale, Arizona to California in May to a house on Wesker Street. The house, a classic craftsman, was the oldest in the entire neighborhood, originally part of a housing development in 1933. It was smaller than the grand 5-bedroom McMansion they had owned in Shawndale, but far more beautiful. The entire Houston family had been excited for the move. Kaylee, 19, was the oldest of 3 sisters. In Shawndale, she had always been the focus of much praise for her good looks, with many people encouraging her to pursue a life in front of cameras, as a model, an actress, or a newscaster. But Kaylee, an introverted and nervous girl by nature, had always been camera shy, and up until her senior year of high school, resistant to the attention foisted upon her. Kaylee was homeschooled and spent the majority of her time alone. This had all changed when Kaylee, encouraged by her sisters and her mother, auditioned for the local high school's winter play. Though she was not technically a student of Fairview Valley High, Kaylee won the role of Ermia in Ace Midnight Summer's Dream and was allowed to participate in the play. The experience was transformed for Kaylee, who found that she loved to be on stage. She began to ask her parents every day to move to Los Angeles so she could pursue a career as an actress. Though it seemed an unlikely dream, Kaylee's change of attitude came at the perfect time for the family. Her father, Jay Houston, was recently retired, and her mother, Diana, was between jobs. Her 2 young sisters were both in the process of switching schools, and their family dog, Pepper, had recently been put down after she was attacked by a coyote or some other small predator in the woods. Kaylee had been the one to find Pepper, injured and crusty with dried blood and drool, her collar missing. Her throat had been pulled apart and one of her eyes torn out. Kaylee had cried all the way to the vet, and the experience had rattled the Houstons badly. Kaylee's new ambitions towards California were a welcome change of pace, one that would guide the family to a new beginning, and the decision was made to go west. The move itself had been frustrating. Several boxes had been lost, and Jay Houston had begun his first morning in California in a 2-hour-long phone argument with the moving company, switching lines to yell at men from the insurance company, and then back again to accuse the movers of everything from incompetence to outright criminal theft. The women of the Houston family had brightened their day by unpacking and exploring the new house. It had come unfurnished other than a single headline telephone in a hallway downstairs between the kitchen and the living room. It was in fact on this phone that first evening that a single call had come through. Kaylee had answered it on instinct, though the Houston family's phone service had yet to be set up. The call had been short, and when she hung up, Kaylee said it had been a wrong number or some kind of prank. Kaylee said that the connection had been bad and choppy, and she had only understood part of what the caller was saying. Though Kaylee attempted to move on from the conversation, the call had clearly upset her, and her mother pressed her for more information. Kaylee said that the only thing she'd heard was a very soft, very quiet voice, possibly a man's, but gentle and near a whisper, repeating a phrase again and again. When Kaylee's mother later spoke to the police, she couldn't remember the phrase word for word, but said it had been something like, "I'm reaching for you. I'm reaching for you with my little fingers." In the following weeks, the Houston girls had registered for the local school districts, and Kaylee had gone out to meet with several commercial modeling agencies her mother had found in the yellow pages. Most of them were the kind of one-stop shops that were common in Los Angeles at the time. photography studios with an agency or management arm attached, working directly with brands and catalogs. Kaylee did a single shot with an agency called Tori Michelle Model Factory. In it, she wore new Kmart teen apparel, with a common practice being to photograph several dozen models and then send their photos in large batches to the distributor for them to pick and choose. Kaylee was thrilled by the shoot and felt emboldened, making fast friends with several other young models in the waiting room, making plans to visit a local mall, the Glendale Galleria, that evening. Diana Houston, excited to see her daughter's newfound outgoing attitude in action, allowed her daughter to go out unchaperoned. But ultimately, Kaylee's anxiety got the better of her, and she stayed in, playing board games with her family. It was at 3 a.m. that evening that the family was awoken by the sound of a dog barking from outside. When Jay Houston went outside to check, he found a small red collar, torn apart and stained with blood, left on the front porch under one of the lawn chairs. This sparked a debate within the family. The parents believed that the collar must have been dropped and discarded during the move, and its discovery now was a coincidence. Kaylee's two sisters, both young, speculated that it could have been a coincidence, but Kaylee herself was certain that this was Pepper's collar, the same collar that had been missing when she'd found Pepper staggering torn apart into the front lawn several months before. Things became more complicated when Kaylee, in an effort to prove her point, attempted to locate a picture of Pepper. It was rapidly discovered that one of the boxes that had gone missing in the move was the one containing all of the Houston family's framed family photographs, and another containing all of their photo albums. This meant, in short, that there was no picture of Pepper to be found, no evidence of the dog ever having existed within the family at all. Pepper had in effect vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an illustration by one of the younger girls in her journal. This reinvigorated Jay Houston's anger at the movers and the insurance company and the mystery of the barking dog, and the torn red collar was slowly forgotten as the family struggled to get back to sleep. Over the next 2 weeks, Kaylee repeatedly tried to bring up the collar, but Diana Houston had thrown it in the garbage the morning it had appeared, and the rest of the family, unsettled by the incident, was eager to move on from the experience. A month passed, and the appearance of the collar was mostly forgotten. On the morning of June 25th, Jay Houston contacted the Glendale Police Department to report that his wallet had been stolen. That evening, while walking home, a long-awaited hangout with her new Los Angeles friends, Kaylee Houston disappeared and was never seen again. She was last seen leaving a Burger King on Brand Avenue at 6:35 p.m., headed back home to meet up with her younger sisters to see a movie. There are reports of a girl matching Kaylee's description, walking quickly, looking upset and anxious, from several eyewitnesses, but none of them could confirm that it was her. In fact, efforts to confirm these sightings were when, in the wake of Kaylee's disappearance, things became truly confounding. Glendale police and the LAPD, as was common practice, asked for a photograph with which to identify Kaylee, only for the Houstons to, with some degree of consternation, realize that they could not supply even a single photograph of their daughter. Homeschooled, Kaylee had no yearbook photographs. The entirety of the family pictures from vacations and holidays had been lost in the move, and the single portrait that Jay Houston had kept with him at all times had gone missing the previous morning inside his stolen wallet. The Houstons, confused and upset, contacted Tori Michelle Model Factory, asking after the photographs from Kaylee's Kmart shoot. They were informed, to their great distress, that the negatives and only existing copies of the photographs had been mailed to the Kmart headquarters in Illinois 2 weeks prior, and since Kaylee had not taken a headshot, there were no photographs on file. The Houstons, at a loss, contacted Fairview Valley High, hoping to get a photograph of Kaylee from her performance in the class production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Furthering their frustration, they learned that the single large photograph taken of the cast displayed in the auditorium had been vandalized in a student break-in that March. Half of the photograph, including the portion featuring Kaylee, having been torn off. The culprit was never found. The photographer herself, drama teacher Marcia Sims, had died of congestive heart failure in April, and most of her possessions given away through Goodwill, so any attempt to find the original photo negative would be near impossible. Unable to supply a photograph, the Houstons were forced to wait for the publication of the Kmart Teen Fall catalog that August. Bureaucratic red tape prevented the police from subpoenaing the full shoot across state lines. And even when Kmart themselves tried to internally track down the rest of the photographs, 40 in total, they could not find them within the tens of thousands of photos submitted weekly for Kmart marketing purposes from agencies all over the United States. The Houston family copied a single image of their missing daughter from the catalog, and months after her disappearance, were finally able to put up missing photos. The single glossy catalog image plastered all over telephone poles and bulletin boards in Los Angeles County. Months passed, years passed, and Kaylee was never seen again. Slowly the poster stopped going up. After 4 years, the Houston family separated. Jay had become too angry, flying into rages, had been involved in an obsessive litigation with the moving company, who he blamed for the disappearance of their daughter. Diana moved with the girls back to Shawndale, and then in with her ailing mother in Florida. Gina Houston, Kaylee's youngest sister, died of an overdose in 2007. Paula, the middle child, now takes care of Diana, who fell ill with Alzheimer's in 2010. Sometimes late at night, Diana will mistake Paula for Kaylee, can often be found in the front yard of their Tampa, Florida home calling out for their dog Pepper. The 40 original photographs of Kaylee have never been found. In November of 2013, a break-in was reported at the home of Andrew Michel, son of Tori Michel, and now the owner of the still operational Tori Michel Model Factory. At first it appeared to be an intentional robbery, but the type of damage reported was more in line with a small animal, with something having torn apart dozens of odd files in the storage unit. Nothing was reported stolen. To this day, Andrew Michel and the LAPD assume it was a raccoon. Now with the liquidation and closing of Kmart stores throughout the country and the collapse of the brand, one can only assume that those photographs and their negatives will have to be moved out of storage somewhere. And it's for this reason that I ask for your help now. They have to be out there somewhere. The pictures, my pictures, the one picture, the original of the Kmart catalog photograph. You can help me find it. If you or anyone has this information on how to locate the originals or the rest of the Kmart shoot, please contact me, as I'm eager to find them. I need the photograph. There are of course digital copies, but those don't matter as much as they aren't really you. I have all the others you see. I have them all. And Kaylee too just needs that last photograph. I want it. And when I get my little fingers on it, she'll have vanished without a trace.